John, do you remember the handouts?
Yeah. So hi everyone, we're just doing a test. We'll be starting in the next 2 minutes. So for all of you online, we will see you shortly. Thank you. We're going to use the just do small tests just to see if people can hear some lines. I have no idea. Pardon? Your volume is high. You can't hear anything. We have to stop talking. That's great. You can hear me before. Yeah. Okay, anyway. So I think it's the background noise that they can't just pick it up right. It's too much background noise. Push. Yeah. You know, Klajdi really needs to I'm not sure if the speaker will take my voice there. Whatever you did the first time was much better. So I didn't have the speaker the first time. Yeah, just try Klajdi without the speaker. Okay, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Product Tank. Woohoo! Okay, well that came through. So that's awesome. So thank you so much for everyone that showed up today in person. We really appreciate you, everyone making the effort. Everyone that's online, again, brilliant to be again happening, right? Getting back to normal, getting back to social relationships, talking to people, doing elbow pumps, hugs, whatever you're comfortable with. But it's great to see everyone in person again. So there's a small little ramble in front. So for those of you who haven't been at our product tank before, we're a community of product managers. And we are a space, a safe space for everyone to talk, tell their war stories, hear from other people about their war stories, and try and learn from each other and support each other through this very difficult time in product development. But anyway, I digress. It's a community and it's all over the world. We had a World Product Tank earlier this year, which we managed to deliver with our colleagues up in Cork and up in Belfast. And it was a great experience to be able to do that online with everyone on the island of Ireland. So it's been a really rich progress this year to at least do that, but we're delighted to be actually in person, and hopefully it's the start of more to come. So you can speak at Product Tank. Anyone that's interested in getting something off their chest, anyone that's interested in having an opinion, interested in joining the conversation, because I think it's only by having conversations that we're all going to learn from each other. So we're looking for speakers. If if you have anything to say, we can give you anything from a lightning talk to you know, a 5-minute pitch, elevator pitch if you have an idea you want to talk about, or we can even give you 20 minutes to actually have a conversation and talk about it. There's lots of different things we've experimented with over the times. We've done panels. So we have a sponsor for the next event. So we've got cash in the bank. So we will be able to run another session at least, and we are really looking for people to come forward from the community. I'm also looking outward. We're looking at, you know, people who are doing on the speaker circuit. You know, with the advantage now of live streaming, we can probably zoom people in from other places. You know, you never know. We might have Marty Kagan speaking in Dublin. I'm not saying he is, but you know, if you're listening, Marty, love to have you. So Klajdi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I will introduce myself. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm a PM at HubSpot. I've been in Dublin for over 3 years now with HubSpot. This is actually my third time speaking at Tank Dublin. So
what's the fun fact?
So the fun fact is that I spoke last year in April, which was the last time we were in person. And this is the first time we're in person, so I'm still here. So I both bad luck and good luck, I guess.
Yeah, nice little dovetail. And hi, my name is John Costello. I'm a co-organiser of Product Tank. I decided I'd put myself forward, try and get this show back on the road, and you know, force my opinion to everyone's throw. But my experience. I've been in product management a long time, 10 years. I've had an emotional but a fantastic roller coaster experience in the career. I've worked in SAP, IBM, HubSpot, and now in Zendesk, and I'm still loving the journey. And I'm hoping that today, myself and Klajdi, we're not here to really tell you how it's done, but we're here to start a conversation. And that's the main thing. I hope you all realize that. We're not saying that we have the answers, but we're saying that there's a problem and we want to start a conversation around the problem. And you know, there's lots of different ways that you can skin a cat, there's lots of different ways you can fix a problem. And what we're hoping to point out today is a little bit of that there's lots of thought leadership already out there in the space about people, what they think, and we want to just start the conversation. So without further ado, we start?
Let's get started. So, I think you have the first slide.
And I just done the first slide.
Oh yeah, I guess you have the first.
Yeah, so we're really just going to talk a little about you know, this thing about breaking the senior PM barrier, where it's something that, you know, it's very hard to kind of put your finger on it, but you know, when you reach that position of senior PM, there's a jump to go into different spaces. And so what today we want to talk about is what is the problem? Like, what is that thing that is the barrier? And we're going to try and a little bit describe that, try and maybe put a little bit of meat on the bones around it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of the role.
Yep.
And
go to some very small builds and what some of the companies have done. Hopefully have a bit of discussion as well. We're going to use Slido.
We're going to use Slido, which is a great introduction to the next slide. So all of you here in person, if you could take your phones out, just get your QR code and read the Slido QR code. Those of you online, if you can do the same, or just go to slido.com and put in the ID 888754. We're going to be running polls, we're going to have our questions there. We're hoping that you guys in the audience and at home can just post your questions and upvote if you see questions there. And we'll have a little bit of engagement, because we really want this to be an engagement and a discussion, right?
Yeah.
So I know there's a bit of a delay online, as we said, and me and Ben were talking about how are we going to fill that time, because you know, there's like a 30-second delay for when things happen in here and when they're actually happening online. So people might have the chance to take a picture and go look at the QR code. And I think that filled enough time. So here we go. For those of you online, hopefully that was enough to actually take a picture of the QR code or go to slido.com. So the first job, just to warm everyone up, to kind of get everyone into the mood, we have a quiz. So if you go to the quiz, you should be able to join. So just put in your name, join the quiz, and you should be able to see the questions. So we've got Ronan, Brian, Ian, Mark. Hopefully those of you online can have a go as well and get involved. Jess, hi Jess. Hi Andy.
Can we go back a moment?
Yes.
The Wi-Fi.
Yes, so the Wi-Fi is Huckletree guest, and the password is stay curious, exclamation mark.
Yeah,
all caps.
all in caps.
All in caps. That doesn't really help you at home, but if you're ever in Hubbletree now, you know what gets Wi-Fi. It's out there in the ether. We'll scrub that later, don't worry. In editing, as if there's editing. Cool. So we got lots of people in. So our first question is, who has the better hair? My colleague Klajdi or John?
This is actually the reason why we did this.
Yeah, this is actually the reason we got you in here, because we wanted to really measure our vanity. So we're getting, oh, Klajdi, you're getting a huge lead, 82%. Amazing.
2 years of work.
2 years. When was the last time you cut it?
Yeah,
without styling. Without styling.
Pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic. Look at that groovy.
This is my pandemic.
Awesome. So 82%. I think Klajdi, you are steaming in the head end.
It's not KPI. Sorry.
Sorry?
What's the definition of better?
Well, the actual answer, as you can see. This is very true. This is very true. But the answer actually is that both of us have the best hair. It's like my kids, you ask them, which do you rather? They say both of them. So the answer is that we both have great hair. Obviously. And the winner is Louise. Go Louise! Getting in there with 6 seconds. Nice one. So, a little bit on to, just to try and get an understanding of everyone's position, where we're at. So we have a first question is, what's your current job title? So if those of you at home could just kind of be posting in and here in the audience. So what's your job title right now? You know, everyone has a title, it's not the same everywhere. We start seeing the clouds coming in. So senior PM is the product manager who's really taking a big lead. Senior manager, director of product, principal, chief product officer, awesome. So as you can see, we've lots of titles, and it's a wide and varied group that we are, and no company at the moment is the same in terms of their models. Director of Product Management, Senior Product Management, good, and Senior PM. So we've got a good list of the actual demographic that we were hoping to hit.
Yeah, exactly. Think about all of it.
So I'm going to move on. So Klajdi, you want to take it away?
Yeah. So yeah, as we were, as John was saying, we wanted just to explore this what we're calling this barrier of senior PM, which is really, you know, what's next after that role, and really what we have seen, at least through our personal discussion and personal experience, is that there is really a barrier there in terms of, okay, like where do I go next from here? And actually, like this past year, I talked to some PMs which have mainly been through what we call the individual contributor track, and it was pretty interesting to learn from them that you know, they're beginning to question whether being the PM is the right job, or you know, which way to go, what is the best way to grow their influence of the organization. So as they hit this kind of senior level, all these, you know, different questions about their role and about how they grow start, and you know, there is a theme here that they all want to grow and they all want to continue growing, but there is some uncertainty on how to grow, and you know, there is especially like a theme between individual contributor and whether to go the management track, and that's where people start to hit that barrier, and especially for a lot of them, it's not always, you know, management is not always the right track, and that's where it gets a bit tough. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so we wanted just to know, obviously there was a lot of people here in different levels, so how do you feel about your product career growth? So if you could tell us whether you are feeling great, you know, you have a clear, viable path, whether, you know, it's not too bad, which is the Irish answer, or whether, you know, it's awful, you have actually been stuck, so let's see. Okay, not too bad, so yeah. Is
Not too bad.
the answer so far?
Yeah.
Great.
Not great. What's the packages? Kind of there's a bit of variation.
At least no one is stuck so far.
No structure parts. That is a great result.
Yeah. Okay.
There might be more. So even I suppose from this quick poll, we can even see that even within our small audience and those of us that are joining online, there's not a very clear path for product management. There is, you know, a path of sorts, but there's not a very clear, distinct set path for us, because the product role has been evolving. You know, it's not that old. It's only been going. So I think I suppose it's where it is.
Yeah. So even though there's not a lot of things written about this topic, which is pretty interesting, there has been some thought leadership, let's say. So this one is actually from an article that Ken Norton wrote. For those that you don't know, Ken Norton is a great product leader, and he has some great writing. So these are some of his quotes, and it's actually pretty interesting on to read some of this. And again, it's about this dilemma between going through the management path or going through the IC track, and even for those that are very sure that they want to stay on the IC track, there is a bit of uncertainty because they are worried if they're going to be left behind, or you know whether it is even an option. And then what I found interesting, that there is some sentiment also on the management side. You know, as a director, some people might not feel very comfortable in the position, but because maybe they were forced to go into management, but actually what they want to do is just do product and work with the product team. So definitely, you know, some of these quotes definitely validate even a bit more that there is this barrier, this uncertainty as you go through these roles.
Yeah, and I think what was kind of very clear in some of those quotes is around how there seems to be like this very set track, and that if you kind of get through the track, you could even find out, well, actually I'm in a position I don't like anymore, and there's no real flexibility or options within the tracks in places. I'm not saying it's the same everywhere, but you know, it's just as a way, and it's like, this is what Ken is talking about. He's really started the conversation as well online, and it's got a lot of traction, right?
Yeah, and we are going to come back to what Ken, some of the insights from Ken again.
Yeah. So even in the early PM, early days, like Procter & Gamble set out the whole, product marketing role. They talked about, what it was. We'll put these slides up later. I've linked out any material so you guys can click in and have a look at some of the material you want. But even they, talk about taking full responsibility for all the advertising, simply not criticizing individual pieces, and see a district manager a number of times a year. They really had kind of set out specific goals that they saw the IC having. But even in the early days, they were seeing the need that there was going to be a need for a group product brand man. There was going to be this concept of that there was going to be a manager of managers. There was going to be this need. So even in the early days, they really kind of saw that value, but that's where it kind of started. And so, we had a long and varied history, it started in 1931, and then Hewlett Packard kind of progressed in 43, Toyota doing their production systems development in 48 to 75, Scrum came around in the 90s, Agile Manifesto in 2001, Lean Startup in 2010, and Mind the Product was started in 2010. So you can see it's been evolving over the times, and then I started in 2011 as a product manager. Fresh behind the years, thinking as a PM I was going to change the world. I was going to be the implementer of change. I was going to be inspiring. I was going to do all the things that I thought that was not capable of being done. And in 2011, I had a great opportunity. I was put into a group with 4 senior PMs at the time, and I had a great kind of learning curve there. I learned from them and really respected what they were kind of teaching at the time, kind of set me on a path. And then I managed to get up to senior PM in my next move, and that really leveled me up. I met 2 other really great product managers in a place, and again we leveled up together. We were senior PMs. We talked about strategy. It became a little bit more leveled up. We were no longer product owners down in the deep. We were talking about strategy, but also with our teams. It evolved from in my early days, it was very seen as the PM was someone that only talked to customers, and the PO was only someone that talked to the team. There was this big chasm. And then it kind of evolved when we kind of got together and we talked about, the PM owning a longer line of that, where we're coming further down into the team, but also talking out to the market and talking to our customers. And the senior PM really kind of enlightened me on how that was going. And I evolved in that role, and I learned more, and I became more of a thinker and a strategic, but I still stayed at that senior PM level. And I kind of got to a stage at senior PM, and I was like, I want to take the next step. I always thought in my head about this thing that I want a seat at the table. I want an influence seat at the table. But as a senior PM, you know, my role was seen as to work with the team, work with your customers, work with the product, you know, drive your product, but, you know, only the managers are going to be having the seat at the leadership table. And I felt that kind of was always, that barrier was there as a starting barrier for me. And so I struggled, and I looked around, and I wondered, and I wasn't sure, did I want to be a manager? It only seemed like the only option for me to actually have a seat at the table was to become a group product manager or a product lead or someone, a manager of people. And I loved product. I loved talking products. I loved working with the teams, but I felt like I had a lot more that I could give at a more strategic level that could kind of have influence and talk about where new things were going to go and maybe drive influence. And then I spotted these principal roles kind of spotting up around the place, and I managed to kind of snag myself a principal role, and that's where my kind of, my career re-energized itself. I found a place where I could have a seat at the table, because no longer was I, you know, just seen as a PM that was just working with the team and with customers. I now also had that, and that was fantastic because I loved that work. But I also had a strategic position with the leadership group and talking with group product managers and directors and really influencing, you know, thought leadership and where there's gaps in the market and really thinking about how we're going to grow our group and have that influence. And that just absolutely energized me. Like, I just kind of completely got invigorated. And as the opportunity came, then there was you know, a room to expand, and now there was a position where I had been mentoring other PMs that were with me, and there was the opportunity to step across and become the group PM. And I felt more ready then, because I had grown and I had this influence. And now I thought, well, there's a part of me that needs to grow, and that is to be a people manager. I want to see what I want to be there, and I had the ability to step across. It was seen as a par with the principal. So there wasn't like I had to get a promotion. I just had to, there was space, and I was able to step into it. So that was just, I wanted to share a little bit of my journey just around, you know, that it's something that is common, and, you know, there are ways. And we wanted to kind of then, you know, kind of encapsulate that with a little bit of what the thought leadership was,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so as John mentioned, he found this, you know, these options on the principal PM path, and actually we now see more and more companies starting to do some what they call dual track. So what you'll see a lot of companies that do, they will have the IC track, so that will actually go usually from an APM to APM, and then, you know, all the way to different roles. And the titles are not very important here. What is important is that these companies are making a deliberate decision to say that as an IC you can actually grow. And actually what's more important than the title is for all of these roles to be very distinct and for them to have clear responsibilities and clear skill sets. So if you go to the next one. So this one, basically the product remains, you know, your product. So it's still about the product. And then the next track is basically the manager track. So at one point, you know, people can go through the group product manager role and director, and this is the more, you know, the more known one, the one that most companies will have. And on this one, so if you go to the next one, on this one, you know, the people or the team actually become your product. And as you go through this transition through the IC track or between the manager track, there is a trade-off that is being made, or a balance that is shifting, and it is between product depth and product breadth. So basically, as you go through, you know, most of the higher roles, you are kind of leaving some of the depth for, you know, a broader area, and obviously through management and leadership. So more you remain on the IC track, more you'll focus your time on the leadership aspects. And, you know, more you go through the manager track, more you focus your time on the manager side. So there is a trade-off to be made. Obviously, as you progress through those, you cannot keep everything at the same level. So I'm actually going to talk a bit more about the trade-offs, because I think it's quite interesting. So just to give you a couple of examples, so we go to the next slide. So Actually, we have seen this for some time on the engineering track. So if you have been, if you look at your organization, there most probably is a more mature or a more developed engineering track, and that's just because engineering organizations in general have been larger, and I assume the need has been a bit earlier for engineers to kind of branch through it. So the model of like a dual track is not a new one. It's just that I think for product it's still a bit new. Yes, if you go to the next one. So these are just two different examples. So GitLab, for example, has IC and they have the roles. And then, for example, Facebook is a good example where they just don't use titles. They just use levels. But again, the same dual track, similar role basically progression.
So we have a quiz then, so for those of you that felt so certain that there was a clear path ahead of you, what is the next path for you? For those of you that are uncertain, then you can also put in, I have no idea where I'm going next. So it'll be just interesting to see where things are going. Yeah, so I have no idea is up there.
Oh, we have some principles.
And some principles, that's good. Hopefully we've educated people that the principle is next. And so the interesting thing as well about this is, I suppose it depends on what company you're with, right? So if you're with a small startup, there's not going to be this clear path. You're probably the only product manager or the only product manager reporting into the CEO, who is the ultimate CPO. And your job is going to be everything from soup to nuts, right? It's going to be everything you're doing. But as the organization scale and grow and there's more room, then that's where these kind of roles and experience can kind of change. So we're not suggesting that this is the one size fits all. It is for the larger organizations because, we are not as prolific in the organization as engineering, and that's why that model already exists. But for those of us that are in the larger organizations and are on the career path, it's not clearly defined everywhere in the same way. I think that's the thing that we are seeing. So it's good here. We're seeing people that have director of product, senior product manager going for next, principal, which is great, and I have no idea. Still 20% of us who are not really sure where we're going next. So, like two good product managers, myself and Klajdi took it upon ourselves to define a problem statement for said problem, because why would we do this without having a problem statement? So I'll read it. So senior product managers feel their career has stalled because we don't provide options for professionals who want to continue to master their craft and have influence at leadership levels. This can lead to burnout, unhappiness for professionals to question their career choice. So it seems very drastic and dramatic, but like for those who find themselves in that position, like it is kind of a capping out. You're told, right, this is really it. It's a career level, your career position, but you really want to be having and growing yourself. And you want to be striving for that goal. It's like me, I need to have a running competition for me to actually get out and run on the road. And if I don't, I tend to sit at home and eating pizzas. But like, it's that kind of natural kind of competitiveness with ourselves. We want to see where we can progress to, where we can go to. What is the next tier? What do I have to do to get to the next tier? And it can lead to a little bit of questioning. It can lead to a little bit of, am I in the right path? And, we kind of force, when those multiple paths are not available, we force people down paths that not maybe cut out to be, because not everyone is cut out to be the same. We're all different. And so, we kind of force people potentially, like we saw some of the quotes from Ken Norton where people were talking about, I'm in a leadership position, I'm looking down at my product managers, and I'm actually quite jealous because I really want to be down in the dirt reviewing the products again. Because that person felt like they've just kind of taken the path because it's the only one that was available to them. And there's no reason why people can't change from one to the other, go into leadership and say, well, okay, it is great, but maybe I really prefer being that master of my craft. Why don't we have that availability? Why do we pigeon people into going a certain path? Was there anything you wanted to say?
No, you said it.
I summed up, so yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about different models. So this is the Trident model. So it's, and again, we have all the links at the end of these slides. So all the research that Klajdi and I, mostly Klajdi, have done are in the last slides. We've got links to all the articles that we've referenced to. So you can actually go there and peruse at your own leisure. But the Trident model, it kind of breaks the known dual track model into a triple track model. And where you've got not only just an IC and a management track, but you've also got this technical leadership track. So you've got the traditional like manager model where you're a manager of people, you're working with people, you're growing your product, which is your people. You've got your IC role where people are, really deep in their detail. They're database administrators, they're tech leads, they're really driving the leading edge of their craft. But then we have this technical leadership model where you've got your architects, your TLs, your people that have that seat at the table, that have that influence, that are explaining the technical limitations and problems to the people who are decision makers at the top. They have that leadership influence, but they're still the masters of their craft. And so it's called this Trident model. It's referenced by the retrograde. Ravi is that's crossing the
Ken Norton, yeah. We'll see this in Ken Norton and how it applies to...
But this is also in the staff engineer model as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's a really good book. Do you want to reference it?
Yeah, Will Larson, I think it is the author, and it's about the engineering path, but I think it explains it quite well, just the IC track for engineering. There's a lot of learning there to apply that product.
Yeah, and the Audible version is very good, I can recommend.
So this is basically how Ken Norton has taken this Trident model and applied it to the product management role. So this is a traditional one. So there is no there is no real track here. There is just one track, and you are supposed to go from ICT manager. And this is how he has applied to the product management role. So it's quite interesting, actually. So it goes away from the dual track, and basically you have first the IC track, and then it branches out from there into the what's called the management track and the product leadership track. I think this one it requires a bit of a larger organization for it to make sense, because it's obviously there's different levels here and people that are doing different jobs. So it does require that level of organization or product area where maybe you need different people at doing different types of jobs.
So yeah, crossing the canyon is really just kind of illustrating this gap, right? You get to that senior PM role, and the guy that is there called Retro.
Ravi Reforge.
Reforge, yeah. So Reforge is where this published, and it's Ravi, and it really talks about this kind of this jump that needs to be made. Like you're amazing with your product. You're knocking it out of the park. You are working with your team. You're inspiring the market to really take on your product. You're looking at the right metrics. But to actually take that step beyond that and to go into group product management requires different skills. And they talk about where to cross the canyon, you really need to, at senior PM, start thinking about broadening your reach and really thinking about how you can get further raw depth across the organization. Start working with other product groups, realizing, and it's not just mentorship, it's really about your breadth of influence across the product spectrum. And talking about that's the experience that really needs to be built up and able to help you take that jump, to jump the canyon as they call it. It's not the only option, but it's if you want to take that option, and where people constantly see, how can I become this group product manager? It's really about broadening that depth of knowledge and having more influence and thinking a little bit further out and thinking about the effects of your product and how, not necessarily how your product is, but maybe the pricing and packaging for another product or a suite might need to be influenced, and how you can actually influence indirectly across the organization to do that. Yeah, so it's really interesting. Yeah, I'll get some of that sorted out.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this is, we are talking about it as a barrier to hit, but actually here it's more like a fall, and that's really where some of those sentiments from senior people are the ones that basically are finding themselves in this fall. So yeah, I want just to talk finally just a little bit about the trade-off. So whenever we see some of these paths, there is always trade-offs that are happening depending on the track that you are taking, and usually the trade-off is between product and management. So you are either doing focusing most of your time on doing product and product activities, or you are doing management activities. So actually, Ken Norton, so he gives a bit of a model for how these trade-offs might look like depending on where you are in the role. So for group product manager, there is actually a combination of three types of work: so people management, IC work, and product leadership. And you can see where it's actually like the same split between people management and product leadership. So group product managers are still expected to do a lot of product leadership, and at the same time they might be going into the C work, so doing the hands-on execution, road mapping, discovery. And as we go through the other two paths, so the principal product manager, you see the IC work. Now it's not anymore. Now it's only about people management and product leadership. And as product manager, I think the good point that Ken makes is that as product manager, it's very hard to be 100% on one side only. You have to kind of do a combination of both. So for principal product managers, is majority product leadership. So that's inspiring, motivating the team, product vision, product strategy, influencing, and then a bit of people management, staffing the team, mentoring, coaching.
It's interesting. The one interesting point about this is when is kind of was it a little bit of a light bulb moment to me when I saw Ken's representation of this. Is the 30% of principal management could be mentorship, it could be staffing.
Yeah.
So a principal could have maybe a junior PM or a PM reporting into them. It doesn't need to be just in the realm. It's just that there's not as much scope for a principal to be able to take on that role, but that it doesn't preclude it. That was just a really interesting point that when I saw that in this thought.
Yeah, I think it's a very good observation. Like people management can take basically different forms. Yeah. And this is another model of responsibility allocation. This is actually from GitLab. So on this one, the way that they do it is between tactical, operational, and strategic work. Unfortunately, they didn't have a definition of what this means, but I think we can all kind of have our own interpretation of those. And as you can see, as you remain in the IC track, you are doing a combination of those three. And as you go up to the higher, more senior roles, so principal, you are reducing your tactical allocation of work. And then as you go to management, that allocation almost goes to zero. And then it's all about strategic and operational. And one thing I wanted to stress on this one is that there is no real, or there is not one way for you to make the trade-offs. But I think where some of the organizations actually don't realize is that they think there is no trade-off. They think that, hey, that if you go through the management role, maybe it's just management. And I think no matter if the company, if the organization puts some trade-offs, some distinct trade-offs or some intentional trade-offs, I believe that trade-offs, people are making those trade-offs anyway. So if you look at your organization, there most probably are GPMs that are doing, maybe 70% people management and 30% product leadership, and some will maybe do another type of split, right? And similar with directors or with senior PMs. So they are making their own trade-offs depending on the situation. So my advice would be that companies actually should be very intentional about the trade-offs that they set up. So they definitely need to be depending on the organization and what works best for them, but they definitely need to put those trade-offs out there. So similar to what Ken or what GitLab are doing here, because essentially if you are not putting those trade-offs forward, there is no expectation, so people will just find whatever works for their situation, and that's where you have misalignment between what is expected of their role and what actually they are spending their time on. So it's kind of where I wanted to end on. I think this trade-off concept is very interesting, and I think the other one is just giving options. I think that's the learning that we got from this, is that, you know, if you are very rigid about your track, the likelihood is that as the organization grows, you will have different archetypes of people, and they will just not fit within that track that the organization has put. So more options you have, more potential you will unlock, depending on what people are best suited for and what they're motivated by.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone's looking for, you know, kind of like a largish company that are successful, that are doing really well, that have put everything up there for everyone to see, TransferWise, or now they're called Wise, they put their whole product management tiering up on their website. They've given descriptions of what each of the role entails. They've also gone one step further and put the salary ones. I've never seen that before, but they put those up there as well, which is really interesting transparency from a company. It's probably the most interesting one that we've seen, right?
Yeah, actually, as I was researching this, there are very few companies that actually publish their tracks. There are some that publish their designer or engineering tracks, but fewer that publish their product management tracks. So GitLab was one, and then I saw Intercom actually had one, and definitely Wise had one, but they also had the salary bands, which was pretty interesting. And there might have been a couple of ones others, but it was very hard to find, you know, this information being public, and definitely that's even harder to you know, find people talking about it, which was interesting. While on the engineering side, there was definitely much more thought leadership, and, you know, a book by Will Larson, which I thought was pretty going pretty deep into the topic. So. Yeah, I think as people talk more about this, as we have more senior PMs either hitting the bar or falling in the canyon, we will most probably need to talk even more about this.
So we hope that as we said, we didn't have all the answers, but what we wanted to do was to start the conversation and to really kind of spur discussion among our peer group within Dublin, to really talk about, you know, what everyone is experiencing. You know, it's not the same model everywhere. There's different models everywhere. So if anyone wants to post any questions, if you don't want to shout them out in the room, feel free to post them on Slido. But is there any questions that have come in on the YouTube chat, Ben, or is everything on Slido?
No, I think everything's on Slido.
Yeah, we're on Slido.
So first one, Ronan, and 2 likes for one. There you go. Did you have to leave your... Is that to me?
No, open question. Just I don't know if it's a poll or something like that, but how hard is it to make that step up, you know, within your existing company? Do you get kind of boxed in, or it's just harder? And that, you know, is it just easier to leave the company and, you know, negotiate that step up as part of that move? So for anyone who's made a senior move, you know, PM to senior, say, upwards, you know, is it more than likely leaving, or have people managed to do it successfully within their company?
Yeah. So I guess who left their company because they did it.
Ben can make some pizza. Nice. I would suggest that I took an opportunity outside of the company I was in order to achieve what I wanted to achieve. Because the company was bigger than me. I wasn't going to change the company. And I think that's kind of like how much influence. If it's a smaller company, maybe there's more influence you have to be able to work with your peers within the company to kind of maybe think about change. But, you know, and you'll see it with other people who strive to maybe get the next level that they wish to get to. They have to take that jump. It's a leap of faith if you want to get on. Sometimes it's a necessary evil to do it. Some people are very lucky that they get a path put forward in front of them. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all, really.
Yeah. Actually, I've been thinking about attrition, and so a lot of, if you talk to a lot of leaders about this, one of the answers they will have is that we don't think we have a problem because we are not seeing any attrition. And actually, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Like, definitely attrition is a very important metric, but is a very lagging metric. it will be a long time before you actually see any attrition because of this. Attrition is very good to highlight very fundamental problems if you have like a very horrible culture, or maybe your compensation is not at the level, things like that. But for when it comes to especially senior PMs, I think, and I don't know what is a good metric about this, but I think what you want to look for is lost potential, right? Because for senior PMs that are at this, they have fallen in the canyon, it's very hard for them to actually continue growing. So it's more about how many of the people that you have in your organization you are not allowing, or you are blocking their exponential or potential growth to wind up, basically. I think that's kind of the loss, and that will not show up in attrition. So even though you might not have an attrition problem, that doesn't mean that you are not losing potential from your existing PMs. Again, very hard to tell, or very hard to measure, I think, that one, but that's really what you might be losing by not allowing flexibility and options for people to really be in a position where they can provide their most potential.
Awesome, yeah. We'll try and get some more questions. So can I eat some pizza? I think we'll have some pizza in a minute. Mark and John, did you ever lose track of your product and targets in the early days when you tried to be more strategic? How did you find the right balance? I just kind of, I suppose, I really just stretched myself. I pushed myself into, working with my team, but what you need to be thinking about there is how can you empower more your team to be more autonomous. And I think a lot about in the early days where I really try to encourage the development teams to be, very self-thinking. It's like, product engineers are not fingers on keyboards. They should be product engineers. They should be able to think. They should be self-forming. They should be able to challenge the thing. Like, once the right problems are in place and in the backlog, it shouldn't need to be, I suppose, minded so much. So it allows the PM then to stretch themselves further up in strategic. I'm not saying I did it very well. I learned on the job, but that's how I found, by stretching myself, to be able to, separate yourself away from the tactical to become more strategic.
You still have to keep your house in order.
Still have to keep your house in order, absolutely. You can't take your eye off that ball, and I think that's the beauty of the PM role, in that you have to be able to broaden that scope, to be able to really keep your focus on a wider thing, and especially it becomes even more so because you're going broader as you go up the levels. Simon, did you want to say something else?
Again, you really don't have to get your product management process in place. So you measure some targets are then something that are established. But then you just not quite turn the handle on, but they become processized. So then you can then get on with that process. You then meeting, and everyone knows that you are meeting what you're meant to be doing because it's as part of that process.
Yeah.
Which then gives you then scope to then use the rest of the day, or the rest of the evening, or the rest of the weekend, or whatever your time you want to allocate to then try and do the strategic side, or take on more product width or more product depth. Whether or not you've got the opportunity within the organisation to go and grab another product from the product portfolio, or take on that, or as you said, cross-pollinate into another product area. Yeah,
I totally agree. I love it when you start hearing your engineering product team start quoting back KPIs to you and questioning where the KPI is at. I really feel like I've been listened to when things that are happening and challenging me. Like, if I'm being challenged on a KPI and being asked why aren't we moving this needle, I feel like, wow, okay, the message is really being embraced, because, as I said, I really strive to see engineers as more than just fingers on keyboards. We're a partnership, we're a team. It should be like a family, to be able to, everyone has got a seat at the table and working towards a common goal. It shouldn't be needed. Another one, any advice for someone starting out in PM who went from PM to product lead within 18 months, then I'm so sorry, and then finally getting back into work hard. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think this one is an interesting one. I think this one is similar to the attrition problem. This most probably is again when people are forced to a certain path and they we don't match the nature of the job with the skills or with what people want and what they are motivated by. So I think one way that this manifests is missed potential. The other one is attrition, and then the other one, which I think maybe on this one, it's companies that maybe don't have a good culture or feedback, is where they blame the people for actually being in the wrong position. So yeah, I think this is just another way the symptoms manifest of people not being in the matched with the right position.
Yeah. And if whoever that person is in that position, I really feel because it's kind of a forcing function that's happened to you, and my advice to whoever that person is to really kind of start thinking about what was that attracted you to that role in the first place. Why did you like it? Was it the interest of influence? Was it the impact of product? There's lots of avenues back into product. Like there's lots of contracting companies that you could get into and working and finding yourself in as a PM in there. Working within startup groups or innovation hubs and getting involved with startup groups and trying to network with people, start talking to people, get yourself back into the frame of talking product. Come to a product tank and let's talk and put yourself on stage and tell us why you love product. This is a great kind of safe space for people to talk about that. But don't be put off. That's what I would say. I love it. It's a great profession. It's got lots of interest. You're never bored. You're going to have lots of impact. Don't be put off. There is lots of avenues back, that's what I would say.
Gibson Biddle also has a great talk on the site, gibsonbiddle.com, called Hacking Your Product Career. So it just breaks down that you should treat it like a hypothesis. What are you interested in? What are you going to grow in? So for somebody that's trying to find what's next, it's a really good framework for actually finding where's a good fit for you to excel in the next, which would probably help get the job in the first place. So
awesome. So Ian, that's hacking the product.
Yeah, hacking your product career, and it's
hacking your product career.
Yeah, gibsonbiddle.com.
Yeah. So gibsonbiddle.com to anyone if you're online or if you're in the room. That was a really great suggestion. Thanks.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add more from the organization perspective is to your point, John, on being able to move from one track to the other. So as a company, you would want to give flexibility and also to encourage people to experiment sometime with some of these positions, because also some of these positions it's very hard to know how they will feel like and whether they are right for you if you don't try them. It's very hard to do that. So one of the best things an organization can do is have the flexibility and then pair that up with a good feedback loop. So people feel like they can understand and find their path.
Yeah, absolutely. And this just warms my heart. So look what's after happening online. So Mark has said, we'd love to speak to Anonymous as my company is hiring, we'd love to help. So whoever you are, there is lots of avenues. We are here to help. We're a product safe group. And so that's amazing to see that. So Mark, what I would suggest is to maybe post on Meetup your email address on this group, and whoever it is can try and get in touch offline. That's all we had.
Yeah, I think this is a great way to end it, actually.
Yeah. Bit of love.
Get Mark to publish his email address and Anonymous.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. If I didn't say that, I apologize. That's what I meant. That's exactly what I meant, Simon. Thank you. Is if Mark can put his, you can just post on Meetup your email address, and then Anonymous can reach out anonymously. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We're delighted we got to get it going in person. So thrilled to have you all here again. And if anyone wants to talk, we have a sponsor, and we're looking for speakers. Take care, everyone. See everyone. Bye-bye. Pizza.
There is actually one other great resource for people for the salaries. It's called levels.fyi. They've got some data in Dublin, but they have product careers and the steps and the salaries that people are paying in Dublin for that. So if you're looking to benchmark.
And the training crowd in the UK do a salary survey as well.
Awesome. So levels.fyi. Levels.fyi. And what was that, Simon?
Oh, whoever the training crowd in the UK is.
Sure, maybe post it on Meetup if on the discussion group you have it. Thanks everyone. Let's get some pizza. Well, it's still maybe one. Goodbye everyone.